What is up, weather enthusiasts? I'm your host, Pat's Path Predictor. Let's get right into the weather. Alright, so here's the situation we have for you, ladies and gentlemen. We have some more stuff to go over with you today. We have more ensemble runs in. We have more operational runs to talk about with you today, as well as some other parameters that we're paying attention to with everything that's going on with this potential area of interest and potential area of development in the Caribbean. But before we get into that, we are briefly going to go over this Invest 90E once again, very briefly, just to kind of give you some context and give you an idea of what's going on over there. We're not going to spend as long as we've been spending the last few days, but we're going to spend a little bit of time on it right now, maybe the first 4 or so minutes, and then we'll go ahead and move on. So here's the situation that we have right here. Still a 100% chance of formation in the next 7 days. First of all, I want to make this point out very quickly. I've been doing hurricane forecasting for the last 8 years, since 2017, and I've been doing it on YouTube since 2021. I have never seen a 100% chance of formation last this long. When you typically see this happen, typically it means, oh, it's about to develop, or we are seeing it develop, but we don't want to take our time and give us a little bit more. And then after that, it's going to develop and pop out as a tropical depression within the next 3 to 9 hours or so. But ultimately, this has been going on for 24 hours, and this is something I've never seen before. So let's go ahead and read this very quickly. Satellite imagery shows showers and thunderstorms are becoming better organized around an area of low pressure located several hundred miles south of the coast of southern Mexico. However, the system still appears to lack a well-defined center of circulation. Environmental conditions remain favorable for further development, and a tropical depression or storm is expected to form later today or tonight as the low moves generally west-northwestward at around 10 miles per hour. For marine forecasts, including gale warnings, see the high seas forecast issued by the NWS, 100% chance of formation right once again. So let's go ahead now and go to Invest 90E and kind of give you some mesoscale idea, and we'll go ahead and use the water vapor imagery to pan out a little bit more. So you are seeing more signs of organization. You are seeing more convection starting to fire up near the surface, near the center of circulation. So we're going to want to definitely pay attention to that as well. And then if we go ahead and move to the Eastern Pacific Eastern Pacific satellite imagery as a whole, you can start seeing a few areas to pay attention to. Number one, you're seeing much stronger outflow than you were yesterday. Good sign that the system's breathing, developing, and about to organize. And another thing, you're seeing more concentrated convection near the center of circulation and a larger area of rotation. You're seeing stronger rotation with this as well as things continue to develop right here. And as more signs have this developing as well, you're going to start having this tagged as a tropical depression pretty soon. I'm a bit surprised they haven't tagged it yet, but they're still waiting for that LCL to drop. It has a mid-level circulation, but the low-level circulation hasn't fully developed yet. It's taking its time doing that. But once it does, it will have a good amount of time to organize and develop as the system continues to intensify and do all of that stuff. And I do still think this could be a hurricane at the end of the day. Some of the other runs are indicating that as well. However, it only has, I would say, about 48 hours max for it to organize and intensify before it moves into this dry air slot right here and higher wind shear, and it ultimately chokes it out. Now, granted, that dry air slot has definitely decreased over the last little while, and we're going to have to pay attention to that. We're seeing more moist air moving into that dry slot, starting to mix it out, and you're seeing this outflow area as well, trying to mix out more of it, which is giving it more time for this to develop and organize and develop as it does. But we're going to have to pay very, very close attention to that. And yes, there is some more moist air and there is some more convection trying to fire in the dry slot right there. We'll have to pay attention to it, but I still think, and a lot of the models also think, that this is going to be there. Also, there's going to be strong wind shear that begins to chip it away, and cooler sea surface temperatures over here that ultimately get the job done. And that's pretty much what we'll see with what is going to be future Alvin. So that's what we have going on in the Eastern Pacific. I told you I would take like 4 minutes or so to do that. I have. And now we're going to go ahead and move on to the Atlantic, ladies and gentlemen. So here's the situation that we have in the Atlantic right here. We have a tropical wave right now approaching the Lesser Antilles right here. We have another tropical wave that just came off the coast of Africa. It's kind of doing its splashdown. It's kind of losing its convection, losing its steam as it's moving over there, starting to get interhooked with the Intertropical Convergence Zone, or ITCZ for short. And then you have another tropical wave. Matter of fact, we can pull up the surface analysis that's currently moving through the Caribbean Sea right now. It's going to take its time. That is not the system I am worried about with developing. It is this tropical wave that is currently approaching the Lesser Antilles that we are watching very closely right here. So this really has shown more convection over the last day or so. Matter of fact, let's go ahead and go back to 120 frames to show you how this has evolved. So you're seeing more and more convection starting to initialize as this wave is starting to detach from the ITCZ. More convection is starting to fire as it's moving through Guyana and Sumarine and those areas right there, approaching Venezuela, Trinidad, Tobago, and those areas. How that evolves and how that convection ultimately holds is going to be critical, because what that is ultimately doing is it's allowing for more moisture to kind of kick in, and more moist atmosphere to be surrounded with, and all of that stuff. Let's go ahead and move to 30 frames real quickly right here. And ultimately, you got this wave that's has a lot of convection. It's not going to organize for a long time. The vorticity is not there. There's still quite a lot of wind shear over there, and there's still quite a bit of dry air that's surrounding it. Let's go ahead and show you that. Yeah, there's a dry air slot over here that's kind of developing and not allowing for the system to develop. So that's why I'm not worried about it in the short term. In the long term, in the Caribbean Sea, you're definitely going to want to pay attention to that. And here's why. This wave right here, what also a combination of the Central American gyre, is ultimately going to allow for this area of the Caribbean Sea that is currently dry to really moisten up in the next week or so. And that's the main area we're going to be paying attention to, particularly the western half of the Caribbean Sea and potentially the Gulf of Mexico in the long term. And we'll continue to keep you updated on that. But for right now, paying attention to this wave, it's really blown up in convection, really bringing a lot more moisture with it. And we're going to see how this ultimately evolves going forward. So with that being said, let's go ahead and look at some of the conditions that we're paying attention to. We're going to go ahead and start with the global sea surface temperatures right here. Global sea temperatures, pretty good to say the very least. They're pretty primed for development already, and it's only late May. However, given what we're going to be taking a look at, these water temperatures are absolutely going to explode throughout the summer, particularly in the Gulf of Mexico and the Western Caribbean Sea. There's less area. And there's a high pressure dome over a lot of the Gulf of Mexico still that we're paying attention to and we're watching. Matter of fact, we can go ahead and show you the climate reanalyzer right here for the Gulf of Mexico. It definitely has slowed down in its warming compared to what we were seeing last week, but it's still warming and it's still close to those 2024 levels of water temperature right there. As more and more start to develop, we can go ahead and show you the anomaly map. The Gulf of Mexico is much warmer above average, and it's also the area with the in the tropics, at least, that has the highest anomalies right there. If you look at the Caribbean Sea over here, matter of fact, we can probably pan this out and show you this. Matter of fact, the Caribbean Sea, let's go ahead and zoom in on this for you. Yes, the Western Caribbean Sea is above average, but you're seeing mostly noise and around average for the rest of the Caribbean. MDR, the southern parts above average, northern parts below average. You're going to want that gradient if you want tropical development to happen. And yes, the subtropics are pretty above average as well, but we're going to want to pay attention to that as well. Also paying attention to the ocean analysis as we continue to take a quick gander at it. Here's the regions 3 and 4 index right here. We're in a negative neutral phase as of right now, according to that region. We're at negative 0.43 degrees Celsius below average. If you want a La Nina, you're going to want it at 0.5 below average. Looking at, excuse me, I apologize for that. Looking at the regions 1 and 2, definitely surging right there. So it's now about 0.46 above average. So we're going to want to pay attention to that. We're still in that neutral phase as well, ladies and gentlemen. So we're going to want to take a look at that. What you want, and I've mentioned this very clearly a lot in my hurricane videos, is what you want for an active hurricane season is a negative neutral to weak La Nina. If you have a too strong of a La Nina, the wind shear is going to weaken to a point where tropical systems aren't going to develop too well. If you have a weak La Nina, the trade winds do weaken by a considerable margin. However, it's enough to allow for a lot of tropical development and more chances of tropical development. It's kind of that sweet spot that we were talking about. So we're going to want to pay attention to those going forward. Also paying attention to the ocean heat content. Let's go ahead and get the updated map for today. We actually do have it for you. OHC still very primed for development right here. And where this area of interest, at least the area of interest I'm looking at, and this tropical wave is entering into, we're looking at a pretty good area, excuse me for doing that, pretty good area in the northwestern Atlantic and even in parts of the southwestern Atlantic that is cracking 100 to 125 OHC right there. For those who have been watching my videos the last few days, I've been saying this like a broken record. 50 OHC is conducive for pretty decent strengthening. 100 OHC is conducive for rapid strengthening. And what OHC measures is how hot the water is at the surface and how deep down it goes below the water. So that's kind of what we're potentially looking at right there, and that's why we're paying close attention. OHC is essentially fuel, like in your gas tank. How much fuel do you have in your gas tank for these hurricanes to intensify? That's pretty much the general gist as to what we're looking at right here with ocean heat content. Now let's go ahead and move to the wind shear. Very quickly, here's the latest wind shear map for you guys. Still pretty strong wind shear across much of the Caribbean and much of the MDR. That's typical for June. That's typical for June, and that's not something I'm too worried about right now. But in the long term, things are going to get a bit more interesting looking at this. Let's go ahead and pull up the GFS wind shear map, and we'll go ahead and run this for you. Here's the 12Z GFS that I have for you right here. Also going to show the 0Z just to show you that I'm not hiding anything. I'm not trying to push a narrative or anything like that. Just rather to give you some context, because there is still some uncertainty, but there is a general idea of what may be happening. So here's what we have with a 12Z. Still, that wind shear is pretty stubborn across much of the Caribbean Sea, but starting around June 6th, you do start seeing that weakening across parts of the Gulf, parts of the Caribbean, parts of those areas as well. And then you start seeing that wind shear collapse around the 9th of June as well, and then you start seeing some stuff happening with that, and especially in the Caribbean. You see that wind shear completely collapse around the 9th of June, according to this latest GFS run. Granted, this is 300 hours out. Things are subject to change, obviously. However, I do point this out because this is around the time where that tropical development is anticipated to get its act together, so we're going to want to pay attention to that. And then going forward, you still have a bit of an increase of that wind shear, but you do see that shear decrease in parts of the Gulf of Mexico, and then off we go from there. So that's the 12Z GFS latest right here. Here's the 0Z GFS to kind of compare and give you some context. Still showing that stubborn shear moving through there. However, around June 5th and June 6th, there is a decrease in the wind shear in the Gulf of Mexico. That kind of quickly recovers itself. But then ultimately around the 9th, you do also start seeing that weakening of the wind shear, and you see pretty weak wind shear, at least for the 9th around much of the Gulf and the northwestern Caribbean Sea. That ultimately recovers. And the wind shear is weakening still, but not as much as what the GFS at the 12Z is indicating. So we're going to want to still pay attention to that. Still calling for a weakening trend in the shear, but ultimately it's a bit variable in how this pans out pretty much. Let's go ahead now and show you the moisture gradient and moisture component to all of this. So here's the moisture that we have. Pretty much what we have is we're seeing more moisture entering the southwestern Caribbean Sea. That tropical wave moves through and enters the central Caribbean Sea and brings a lot of moisture. By June 1st, what you're noticing here is, yes, there is some pockets of dry air in the central Caribbean, the northwestern Caribbean, and the Gulf of Mexico, but a lot of the dry air has really, like the strong dry air rather, really has exited much of the western Atlantic over here. And that's a sign you're going to want to look for if you're potentially looking at potential tropical development. Hurricanes and tropical cyclones absolutely cannot function in dry air. They need moisture around it, and if there's a dry air intrusion, that gets to the core of it, it can absolutely disrupt it and choke it off and kill off a potential hurricane like it did with Hurricane Estelle in the Eastern Pacific back in 2022. Also revisited that case during my boundary layer course because a lot of that dry air just really moved through in the boundary layer, which is the lowest 150 millibars, around like 850 millibars down to the surface. I know I'm going off on a bit of a tangent right here, but I'm just giving you an example of what dry air can do to a tropical cyclone. But ultimately, you have this system moving through, and then you have a huge moisture injection from the Central American gyre as well as from Colombia as well. You have a huge moisture injection starting around June 4th, moving through the 5th, through the 6th, through the 7th, and then you start seeing that dry air exiting much of the region. Then you have another moisture injection across much of the Gulf of Mexico as the system is allegedly going to organize and develop around that time. We're going to want to pay very close attention to that, ladies and gentlemen, because you're seeing two moisture injections. The first one from Panama, Costa Rica, Colombia, and the second one from Central America, from Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala, Honduras. That's going to allow for a more moist air to enter the region. So that's kind of what we're looking at with that. Now let's go ahead and show you some ensemble runs right here. Here's the 0Z European ensemble run that's come out. Compared to the 12Z, this is a massive uptrend, and I'm going to go ahead and try to show that right here. I'm going to try to pull it up from my tropical team at Storms United while I am talking to you guys, moving through very quickly at this current point. Yes, here is the 12Z European ensemble runs right here. 12Z European right here. Not nearly as strong of a signal. The majority of the runs have it crashing into Central America, and the ones that do enter the Gulf of Mexico are relatively weak and all that stuff, and approaching the west towards Mexico, Texas, those areas as well. Here's the 0Z. A lot stronger of a signal, ladies and gentlemen. We have, I would have to say, this has to be like 25 to 30 ensemble runs indicating development and indicating potential for a Gulf Coast area landfall. Now, I'm not saying that we're looking at a potential hurricane right here. I'm not even close to that. I know the 12Z GFS freaked a lot of people out from yesterday, but I'm not saying that. I'm not going to even say what intensity this is right now. But what I am saying is the ensembles are in more agreement right now. That's the European ensembles. Let's go ahead and show you the GFS ensembles as well, just for the sake of argument. Here's what we have, and we'll go ahead and go out to 336 hours out just to max it out. Even the GFS ensembles are showing more agreement with this right here. We're not seeing too much with the operational runs right now, but with the ensembles, when they pick up on a pretty consistent schedule, the operational runs usually take a few days for it to kind of pick up and also run its own scenario as well. The ensembles are, in the case of the GFS, I believe it's like 30 ensemble runs with the GFS and 51 with the Euro. And what you're seeing is out of 30 scenarios, how many of these are registering tropical development right here, or at least some sort of low pressure system. So ultimately, that's what we're looking at with this right here. And I'm moving this over just to kind of give you a general gist. That's the 0Z GFS for you right here. Pretty aligned with the 0Z Euro too, I would say, as well. Comparing the two a little bit. That's a 12Z, I apologize. Yeah, pretty consistent, I would say. We're going to want to watch those ensemble trends over the next few days or so, and just because I believe the 12Z, yeah, it's mostly out. We have 234 hours of it out. Yeah, the 12Z is also picking up on more of these signals as well, and this is by June 7th, which is when convection and tropical development would likely start to initiate and start to develop this system. But you are starting to see a pretty interesting signal with the 12Z GFS. So we're going to have to see how this ultimately would pan out, but by and large, you're seeing a continual uptrend with the ensemble runs. You're seeing at least the operational runs kind of slowly getting their act together. They're showing, like the GFS was showing a hurricane, like a Cat 2 moving through the Gulf. That's likely not going to happen unless something unexpected happens and we start to see those returns on the ensembles. It was one of those scenarios where we had the operational run stronger than the ensembles, and typically that's not how that usually works. Really, it's usually the ensembles that pick up on it first, and then the operational runs that pick up on it. Why am I bringing this all up? Well, ultimately, stronger signal means more consistency. We're also seeing a higher chance of development, at least in terms of what the ensembles are showing. And that's things we're going to have to pay attention to, and we will continue to update you here on the Pat's Path Predictor channel. But with that being said, we're going to go ahead and close the video out right here. I really hope you enjoyed it. Be sure to leave a like and subscribe to the channel if you are new. The goal, as always, is to get more people engaged with weather. And if you want to ask us questions or you want to hang out with us or be a huge help to our tropical team at Storms United, be sure to join the Storms United Discord server. All are welcome. It is in the end screen. And with that being said, have a wonderful day, guys. Stay safe.